So we're going to get into our first review, which is Perfect Blue. Perfect Blue is a Japanese anime film. It is directed by, correct me if I'm pronouncing this wrong, Satoshi Kon. Is that how you say it?
Uh,
I believe
Satoshi
it's
Kon?
Satoshi Kon, but
no, yeah,
I could be wrong.
I'm trying to. It's Satoshi Kon. Yeah.
Oh.
Think about that.
Satoshi Kon. And this film came out in 1997. And the reason we want to kind of review it is because it is the 25th anniversary of this film. I had never seen it before, but you two guys had already previously seen it. And just in case, as Michael mentioned beforehand, he gave me a good heads up just to put a trigger warning here. So we discuss maybe some incident of this film does involve some sexual assault, sexual violence in here. So if people are sensitive to that, be wary of that. But he's a big time director in Japan. He's directed many other movies. Yeah. Tokyo Godfather is a big one that he also directed. Paranoia Agent is another one directed. Pakira is another one he directed as well, which I heard that movie is very much inspired Inception.
Oh, yeah. This was actually his debut film. And this just kind of like launched him into stardom.
Okay. Yeah. And it bursted out. He said launched him into stardom. It also was very influential for a lot of American filmmakers that we're going to be touching on. People like Darren Aronofsky. Very like this scene in the bathtub that you see. If you've watched Requiem for a Dream, that scene appears in that film, and Darren Aronofsky was a big fan of this movie, and he discussed it a lot and how it was very influential in his work with movies like Requiem for a Dream. But yeah, so in this movie, Perfect Blue, you have a woman, Mima, who is part of a Japanese idol group called Chaim. Is that was the name of it?
Chaim? Yeah, something like that.
Chaim there. So she's an idol, very famous, and she decides at one of her concerts that she makes an announcement that she's going to retire, from being an idol and going to more pursue a career of acting, and being an actress. And while she's kind of pursuing that career of being an actress, she starts getting a lot of these weird kind of messages, these threats, people in her life that are close to her end up dead. She gets a lot of these threats because it seems like the people, who are kind of following her and watching her don't want her to stop being an idol. They still have that image of her in their head of being that same idol, wearing the same outfits, singing the same songs, everything like that. And the movie, very much kind of parallels, you can see a lot of from like real life people, even maybe after this movie came, people like Miley Cyrus, where you see like, trying to break that image of like the child star into more of trying to adulthood, getting more risque roles. For instance, in this movie, you see her like she takes on a role in a film where she gets raped. Then she poses nude in a magazine. She really is trying hard to shed that image of that very nice, sweet girl, idol girl, there to be taken more seriously, as an actor there. And it kind of becomes more increasingly dangerous for her, as I said, with this stalker who keeps pursuing her. And also this was in, like I said, 1997. So you also have the kind of the emergence of like the internet, things like that started to become really big. So for instance, you start to see her like in this chat room called Mima's room. And she needs help like setting up the internet and everything like that. Cause this is very, very new stuff here. So it kind of, the film is very much predicted a lot of things, celebrity culture, that became very prominent, as more of the decades have gone on.
Was this before or after the Bjork Stalker? Like, do you remember that? Because this would have been around the same time, wasn't it?
The Bjork Stalker. I think that was more like the mid 90s, because that's when she was kind of big, right? The mid 90s, maybe. Yeah. And you're referencing the Bjork stalker. She also had a stalker as well who was very much obsessed with her. And I think he ended up killing himself, right? Self deleting himself there. He ended up doing that. Another person you could kind of remember, John Hinckley. That's probably another person you could think of, like with Jodie Foster there. If only his aim had been better, but that's okay. Yeah, so you had him. I can't think of any like more recent one that's happened. If you guys can think of any more like in the past decade or so.
Not as much, just like the typical stuff. But this is also like of course, yeah, of course we can relate this to like American pop culture as well. But like Japan also has a very odd like. This is gonna sound a bit hypocritical coming from like in America, but like Japan has a very intense like idol culture thing, and it's very grueling work for a lot of these idols because a lot of them, especially women, like from a young age, it's way more of like an industry here. It's like there's a specific career that's been happening for like a long time. And it's like when you're a child, you kind of get like just put away and like trained to like how to sing and how to act. And once you're ready, they just put you on stage. But it's just like even by like American standards of like how harsh like some of the stuff, how grueling it can be for like some of our like singers or like famous people, like Japan, and we even seen this in other Asian countries like Korea,
Yeah.
of like the K-pop industry stuff. Is like it's a very like harsh machine, like even by like the harshest machines of like Hollywood standards. So and sexual assault is something that very sadly happens in a lot of this stuff, and like sexual deviancy and kind of limits on like especially women's sexuality to make them sing pure. Because I remember there was one specific. I remember hearing this actually from a friend of mine who lives in Japan about like how there was an idol in Japan and like she wasn't allowed to. She had to sign a contract where she couldn't really date someone, so other people can like still think she's like pure or like an option towards them.
Right. Yeah, I think that was very much the thing like we had in America with like the Jonas Brothers and the whole like purity ring thing.
Oh
And
yeah.
that. So you did have kind of that going on. And you mentioned the Buyuk Starker. So he did self delete in 1996. So that went up. So when the movie, so that probably was a little bit of inspiration for Perfect Blue a little bit. And then he did end up like mailing a letter bomb to her. And you do see a letter bomb in this movie as well. That gets sent to the her.
Oh yeah.
So I'm gonna pass it around and then kind of get some thoughts. So Sage, what were some of your thoughts on Perfect Blue there?
Yeah, I was specifically going to touch on the K-pop industry. I'm glad you brought that up too, because I feel like I see a lot of that in recent history. That's where there's a lot of that kind of overly corporate controlling behavior of people's lives. That kind of duality of the true self and the avatar, and how a celebrity figure can kind of be, because some of this is absolutely like you got the toxic fan culture, the stalker character, but I also think there's some interesting stuff, even setting that aside, just with how people can struggle with their public persona and whether or not that's really them, how cultivated that image can be. And kind of losing themselves, like one of the like the opening shot of the movie. I was reading some interviews too with the director from before he passed, and one thing that he talked about is how much he wanted to kind of try to confuse the audience. So like the opening shot of the movie almost looks like you're watching like the Power Rangers just for a second.
Oh yeah.
And he made that choice because he straight up wanted people to think like, oh, did I rent the wrong movie? Did they give me the wrong? Like, am I? And so it's I think he does a really good job of these very off kilter transition sequences. I think that's something you can see that in all of his work too. Like in Paprika, there's also a lot of these really impressive transition animations. But here, it really kind of messes with your perception of reality and the way that you are able to follow how she is seeing everything. I mean, there's several times in this movie where I think if it's the first time you watched it, at least for me, I totally was like, wait, is this the movie? Is this her life? Is this what she's imagining her life to be? Is this the fantasy of the stalker, or is this the representation of the avatar? Yeah, it's something I found super interesting. I mean, even going up to the very end, I don't think you can 100% know what's going on at any given moment.
Mm. Yeah. Michael, what about you?
I think this is one of his like not his if not his magnum opus, but like definitely an example of why Satoshi Kon is just an amazing director of just making you feel for its main character, but like also like how distinctly vulnerable and just some of the framing distinction, especially one of my favorite shots in the thing comes from like it because there is commentary on this and like how certain men and women will view other women and like stuff like when the stalker has like this and then you see it from his point of view and you see Mima right here like he's literally seen her for her like avatar mascot persona and he just like pictures her in the palm of his hand and then are we doing spoiler talk?
Yeah, we can do
Okay.
spoilers for 25
25 years. Yeah. I'm that all the way with my friends because I was talking about Death Note one time and he's like, spoilers. I'm like, well, I'm going to say what happens. It's been 20 years. But with Rumi, especially how when we find out like Rumi was also not only harassing Mima, but she wants Mima dead basically because she just was like jealous of like the kind of persona Mima had like and you see it when she puts on her like her mascot costume. Like it doesn't quite fit because she has a bit more of just like an average like lady build. She's implied to be a bit older, and she manages all these like idols who are like very pretty, very thin, very young, and like who are probably on like all these crazy diets and stuff. And like her seeing that and see how much they're loved and stuff while she does a bunch of work with her has kind of driven her to madness and leads to her assaulting her. Actually, with one of the most I watched it recently again, and like that screwdriver scene still makes me go like this every time I see it. Any of the chase scenes are just like incredibly uncomfortable and frightening.
Yeah. And you mentioned so you have kind of two people here that are her main stars. You bring up Rumi, who's here, who's her not I don't think it's her manager, is it? Or more
I think it's something like agent. I mean, she's
agent? I
there.
think it's
Yeah,
more
it might be
agent.
different with Japan. So,
Yeah. Because you see her kind of working at the desk, and then you see him like the other dude who's like, yeah. So it's like more like she's the assistant to the maybe manager or agent, I
yeah,
guess, something like that. But she does work very closely with like, all these idols, and you see there. And then the stalker character. Let me see if I can pull him up in the trailer here. I told
Mr. Murama. Is that his name?
The Mania.
Yeah.
I think that he only goes by his
His last,
username.
yeah. Which that's another thing of like just how ignatic and like how this guy can just be anywhere in real life, which I think was very much the intention.
Yeah. I was actually reading a little bit about because this is based on a book too, and in the book, the stalker character is given more of a backstory and a little more of like, here's who this is, and Satoshi Kon intentionally was like, let's pull back on that. Like this is it. Like I think it's much scarier to have this person be very vague and could be anyone. It adds to the tension. I think a lot better to not know.
Yeah, because you see him, he'll pop up like when she's doing her, shoots when she's doing for a TV show. She's out somewhere, you'll see him, and then quickly, and then she'll look over, then he's gone. Then you'll see him when he's just in his room, where she's just surrounded by posters of her, and then the posters kind of talk to him. And I mentioned this, I don't know if this is intentional, but I mentioned this to Sage earlier that he kind of looks like Richard Ramirez a little bit. I don't know. I don't know. Because he's got the fucked up teeth like Richard Ramirez. I don't know. Maybe that's what it is. He's kind of got this gaunt type look to him, very pale. Definitely the gamer look. He's got definitely the gamer online look there.
That gamer.
Kind of like fish eyes too, like real far apart.
Yeah, and that's the same way with her. The manager, the agent she has, like the person, Rumi also has very far apart eyes too, as well.
Yeah. I do think with Rumi, it's a bit more of just like, well, this is throughout the whole movie, and even like all the idols we see, while like very like pretty and like statuesque. None of them are like you can run into these people in real life for the most part. Like they're not going to be insane proportions or anything like that. Or no, yeah, it's like there's a great scene. I say like 15 minutes in where it's we cut from the band to just like our main character's just everyday life and like what she's doing. She's like picking up groceries and stuff like that, and she's like on the train. And it's like, okay, yeah, this can just happen anywhere in Japan during the 90s or stuff like that.
Yeah. So yeah, you do kind of see that. Yeah, just kind of her, inside of her life, what she's kind of going through, and the mental turmoil that she kind of goes through out this whole movie of seeing things that aren't there, questioning herself. She's very much hearing this voice of the idol version of herself in the costume that you first see in the very first movie, like this schoolgirl type outfit there, where she's kind of just floating. You know what I mean? And there's like the old you wouldn't have done this. They wouldn't have, the old you wouldn't have, done this movie or, done this photo shoot and everything like that. And I thought that was very interesting too, how she's constantly battling with herself there. And Sage mentioned how this was based on a book here, that this film was on. Very good. Thank you for that, Sage. And also, like I said, this movie was very inspirational to a lot of American people as well. It's one of the big things that crossed over. At the beginning of this trailer, you see a lot of famous industry people here. Roger Corman commented on it. I mentioned Darren Aronofsky, and the scene that people will probably remember in the movie. It's kind of a famous scene. Is a scene where she's kind of in the bathtub here, and she just kind of screams, and you see that kind of replicated here. In
Black Swan.
I was going to say Black Swan kind of takes the whole plot.
Yeah.
Black Swan too. Yeah, Black Swan kind of also. And I think I was reading Darren Aronofsky actually wanted to do an adaptation of Perfect Blue, but he couldn't get the rights to do it. So that's what kind of led him down to doing Requiem for a Dream and then Black Swan. So that was So that's pretty good too. So I found that really good too. And then also like you mentioned Akira, how that was also hugely influential for a lot of people too, and now that was inspiring. Which was, I thought, very interesting to read. Yeah. So that was very good of how, because anime is treated way different, and the cartoons are treated way different in Japan as opposed to America, and Western audiences of how it's seen just mainly for kids. And then, anime is just used as a medium to tell a story in Japan there and tell any type of story they want. With that kind of do you see kind of a lot of those huge influences in other pieces of work with Perfect Blue, like in other different movies there, and that type of stuff there?
I would say not as much as say like Paprika or even Paranoid Agents, the anime series, though. To be fair, but this is definitely still influential. Like it's like if you see a reference of something like Perfect Blue in like a movie, like you'll catch it, but it's like, oh, that'll make you smile. And it's like, oh yeah, this person, it's not as on the nose as say like the Kira bike slide, which pops up everywhere.
Because
I've only seen that a million times.
Yeah.
They just did that in Nope. They just did that.
I saw a clip of that, and that kind of drove me nuts because like the thing is like in Akira, they're giant like futuristic monster motorcycles, which is why they're able to do that slide. For once, I want someone just on a motorbike just to do that slide, but just fall down.
So you think a movie like Perfect Blue is kind of very much? Is it still kind of very much well remembered? Do you think about
I say it's well appreciated, not as like famous as like as some American horror movies like Psycho, like how that's just known everywhere. But like it's gonna be up there, especially with people who have a love of psychological horror or just like anime, like famous anime movies.
Yeah, Sage, what's kind of your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think I pretty much share the same sentiment. I think you may not always see direct references to it or that kind of immediate inspiration. But I do think there's, whether it's intentional or not, I do feel like I see stuff like maybe even Hereditary or Midsummer by Ari Aster, that have similar uncomfortable tones. Even if I'm not seeing anything that's obviously inspired, there is a certain level of deep psychological discomfort that you get out of stuff like that. But I wouldn't be shocked to find out that Perfect Blue is a big inspiration. Another thing too, I was just reading earlier today was that initially they were just going to go straight to a live action adaptation, and the budget got reduced, and then that was canceled, and then it only came to Satoshi Kon and became an animated project after that happened. And I think that's really interesting too, because it just speaks to how in Japanese culture, animation just as a medium to tell a story is just appreciated so much more. Like that was so easy a decision to go like, well, if we can't afford this, let's do this. That's obviously just what makes sense. And here, I don't know if that would happen with the project. And if it did, probably wouldn't be seen nor appreciated nearly as much.
Yeah, but I'm comparing some of the shots to like what would happen in live action. It's still like, even though this isn't as big as like say Paprika or like his other stuff, like there's still shots in here that would probably be more complicated to do. I'm not saying you can't do it, but like some of the car chases, especially like how she gets hit, or like some of the weird trippier stuff as like the impossible spaces. But I do mainly think of the climax with Rumi, and like how that gets like a vision and like warped. Like you're not going to get that. If you do get that bouncy effect, it's going to be like super hard to like actually do without making it seem goofy. Maybe you could just have her float and follow you, but even still.
And there was a live action movie of this eventually. Like later on, there was a live action version of this. Have you guys ever seen the live action movie?
No, I haven't.
Actually, just watched a breakdown analysis of it this morning.
Okay.
It didn't seem to follow the same blueprint quite as well or quite as faithfully.
Is it more like, I'm not sure because I haven't read, but is it more like the book, or?
It's a little bit more like the book from what I could tell, but it also has a lot of its own original embellishments that just, I don't know. From what I saw, it seemed like it was pretty dull and boring. The guy that directed it had like a history of doing like almost exclusively like pornographic adult films, and then it was like his way of breaking into or attempting to break into a mainstream film. And it seemed like without being able to put all the graphic sex scenes in there just really wasn't a whole lot going on. He didn't seem like he really knew what to do with it.
Okay. Interesting. So I have not seen a live action film there. I mean, probably a good thing that many people probably didn't hear about that there. But you mentioned, some of the stuff you couldn't do in live action. That'd be a little bit tough to do, Mike, there. The climax of this, when she discovers everything, is really impactful. And then you still see why she's being chased. You don't ever see Rumi chasing her. No. You just see, the floating image of herself as the idol, Mimi as the idol there chasing her. And then the only time you ever see Rumi is through the reflections in the mirror, there where you see her truly there. So I thought that was really good, and that was kind of well done.
There's one shot where you see Rumi, but it's like half a frame, and it's like, well, not even that. Well, it's just like a few frames, but it's like such an incredible smooth transition. It's where she's like strangling Rumi because she's trying to stab her, and like it goes from like the idol face, then very briefly like morphs into Rumi's face once more, and then she gets fall down. And I just think you don't mention it because you don't really notice it because it's just done like that well. But I'm trying to think of trying to do that in live action. That would just be a Herculean task.
And then you see like she transforms back into Rumi when she knocks her wig off there, Mima wig, and she transforms fully back into her. I thought that was really great. What's some of your favorite moments here, Sage, from Perfect Blue?
There's one I wanted to bring up because I didn't catch it. Probably seen this. I think watching it again this week was probably the third time I've watched it. I never picked up on the small detail, but I love the way that this ends. And at least in the original Japanese, I'm not sure if it's the same in the English dub. And I had to have this pointed out to me, but in the very final moment when she leaves Rumi in the hospital, she's like, I'm never going to have to deal with this again. I know I'm real. And she sits down in her car. She says, I'm real in the rear view mirror. And you see that little reflection again. In the Japanese, it's actually Rumi's voice actress that says that line. And I love, because, sometimes the vague endings can feel cheap and like they don't properly answer. But I think when this whole film is kind of playing with your perception of reality from the opening shot to the ending shot, I think that's a really clever and interesting little detail to point out. That I think the way that it ends is definitely one of my
favorites. I have also heard of the kind of the theory or idea of like, it's not so she thinks she's Ruby anymore. She just she wants to from her now on, her life's just gonna be entirely plain. Like it implies that like she's not gonna go into stardom anymore. She's got like the sunglasses on and all that. She's clearly not wearing any makeup. But it's like, this is something she's done with now.
Okay. I thought at the end of the movie, I thought it said that she had become a successful actress, right? At the end of the movie, right?
Well, I think it might have been like she was known because of the thing she was filming throughout the movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that. Okay. So yeah, that's very interesting. I didn't know that. That's very interesting you bring that up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I've never seen the English dub.
Yeah, I didn't watch the English dub. I only watched the subtitle version of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I have seen both, and I do actually think the English dub is pretty good. For me, I could be really picky with that. A lot of English dubs aren't super to my liking, but I actually think all three of the Satoshi Kon films that I have seen, I've actually liked the English dubs.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah. What do you think is the meaning behind that scene there, Sage?
Well, I think it is intentionally really up to interpretation. I think you could look at it, and one way could be fully just interpreting it as I'm leaving this behind, I'm leaving this life behind, I'm leaving what other people's perceptions of me behind. I also think you could interpret it almost as, is Rumi the one that really got left in the hospital, or is that are we even really being shown what's really happening there? Is it possible that Mima is the one that has been left behind and Rumi is still in her psychosis, seeing herself leaving and having a resolution? I think there's a lot of different ways you could look at it. I'd like to think that she got out of there and was able to kind of have a normal life, but when the whole thing is kind of tailored around kind of messing with your expectations, I think it's hard to land on a totally concrete answer. But those are the two interpretations I think I find the most interesting.
Yeah. Well, I do think, because Japan loves to do this with their weird like name puns, but like the way Rumi is spelled, it can either mean like, are you me, or like, who are you? That's like what it can mean though. And it's kind of like the whole like implication with like her psychosis and stuff.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, you also have her first, when she gets that first acting job, and it's just one line that she's being brought in for. That one line, and that there's a great moment where she's saying it over and over and over again. Is it, who am I? And she's like repeating that line over and over. And if you just take it in a literal plot context, she's just reciting her line. But I think obviously, like most of those moments in the movie, there's definitely another meaning of her repeating "Who are you?" over and over and over again, super early.
Yeah. It's like poetry; it rhymes.
Yeah.
Very nice there. When it comes to the violence and the sexual nature of this movie, do you think it's too much? Do you think it's, I guess the required amount for something like this? Is it excessive, or do you feel like it works really well? Or
I would call it intense, but I wouldn't say it's like that, like overly grotesque or anything, or like indulgent. It becomes like torture porn or anything, or especially because I think it's because like with stuff about like this and like stalkers and like sexual assault, like even in Japan too, is like, in the back of the mind, the back of your mind that this happens a lot, and like it's just one of those things that's kind of like brushed under. And a scene that actually like they compare, like they're shot in the same way, but like they're compared of was the like the when they filmed the rape scene of like her as a stripper who gets assaulted with all these like patrons. And a thing I really liked is that like when they have to like do all the thing of like, okay, cut, okay, zoom in, and then they're like getting all these people, but one of the actors who's like about to grope her is a man, like he's an actor, but he says like, hey, I'm sorry about this is really uncomfortable, and she goes, no, it's all right. And you could tell it's one of those things of like it's one of those things that's like brought on almost by the director that like puts actors in like uncomfortable situations and just like how that'll impact them later, but the actors don't want to say no either. And there's that way of like sexual violence. But then there's like the other one of the stalker when he gets her in the exact same location, the dream sequence or not. I know some people have debated about that, but it's like, and like how he thinks like he's owed this, or like that he belongs to her, doesn't really see her as a person. It never, yeah, you never really, with both those scenes, you don't see any like, I'd say like kind of like how Game of Thrones like in the show at times got to like, it's almost like the camera's like coming at it from like very specific angles. Like I think this is one of those things of like, yeah, not tastefully done, but like done in a artistic way, or like done in a way that like isn't going to like, it will shock people, but it won't like, it's not like someone they just put in to be like, yeah, isn't that shocking or like offensive or anything like that. More like there's a meaning behind it.
What about you, Sage?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think there's, you know, a pretty general amount of restraint, and the fact that, you know, it's always focused on the psychological fallout of the moment and how that effect on the mind that it has. And so it's got meaning. There's a detail too that I noticed, that the costume that she's having to wear in that when filming that scene is very similar to her idol outfit that she's wearing at the beginning of the movie. And I feel like there's also an aspect of that moment that kind of, it almost represents the death of her old avatar, or like the fully like, this is the moment, you cannot go back to that image that she had before. And also to your point about how she, you know, and she's so reluctant to say no because of her bosses, and to you know, she feels so guilty about, you know, standing up for herself at all, because she thinks, all these people they're doing so much for me to have this career. That is, you know, just yet another example of her struggling between her own true self and the desires of what a new avatar would be. And I think there's a lot of that reflection, and that's also the you know, as after that scene, that's when I think the distortion of kind of how much time is passing and like which things are the movie and which things are her real life. That's when that really starts to break down and kind of become fluid throughout the rest of the film.
Yeah. And what was she was supposed to be like a maid? Like that was like kind of the outfit, I think.
I think a stripper.
She was a stripper. The scene is like, it's a stripper, but then the patrons get like really rowdy and rape her.
Right.
I don't know what movie they're making.
Because I think in that moment there's another character or actor that's supposed to be like the manager, and he gets grabbed and thrown off the stage first or something.
Yeah. So they're doing that. Any negatives as you can think of with this movie?
Not a ton. I wouldn't call this really negative, but more like my level of like suspension of disbelief is like it's kind of the thing of like some like horror movies or like the Scream slashers and stuff like that. Of like, you get stabbed so many times. Like, is your body still like at what point do you get stabbed like the fifth time? Like, I feel like your body would just be like, I'm done. I'm out.
Swiss cheese.
Yeah, but it's like, okay, it's like, a part of me can buy like surviving being stabbed a few times, but like with that big of a knife or a pen or a screwdriver, it just keeps on happening. It's like, that was the
pane of glass.
Oh yeah, that was the thing with Rumi. Like, they didn't really like cut her neck. I'm like, there's
I think she like impaled herself. I think it was
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
like
it's like a
stomach.
3-foot
okay.
glass piece that goes like right through her
Yeah,
abdomen.
it's like you can't survive that, but it's like I do feel like at some point it's like, just like no, if you're dead at that point.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I mean, people can survive being shot multiple
Yeah,
times.
that's true. It's one of those
Uh,
things that's like it's hard to believe in fiction because despite how strange it can happen in like reality.
yeah. I guess it was kind of like that latest Scream movie where that dude he got stabbed like all
Oh
like
yeah.
by both people a bunch of those times. Like it was
Yeah.
what's his name? Mason Gooding,
Mm.
Cuba Gooding Jr.'s son, and he ggets stabbed. It's like there's no fucking way that dude lived, but
Yeah.
we're gonna believe it, I guess. Yeah, Sage, what about you? Any negatives?
Honestly, no. I don't really have a lot of complaints. I mean, the only like kind of caveat I would give anyone would be like if assault or rape
That's
or
fair.
some of these subject matters, if that is super triggering or hard to deal with or hard to watch for certain people, I'd say like it's definitely worth giving a warning before trying to watch the movie. But outside of that, I mean, I think the story feels really pointed, even if you have to do a little bit of an extra analysis to kind of understand it and interpret it. Yeah, I think it's a great film. I don't have a lot of negatives.
Yeah, I guess the only one I can really think of is that when things start happening, like the letter bomb, and then the photographer gets killed, and the director was it the writer of the movie gets killed, and like at some point you think police would get involved, or it's like okay, these things all seem to be
That's fair,
connected,
yeah.
and then they would come to her and they would maybe go like, well, this letter was meant for you and it exploded, like maybe we're gonna put you in protection or something or
Right.
investigate this. Like I don't really see much of a police presence here in the movie, so that seems kind of
That's true.
odd. The fact that she knows she's getting stalked and everything like that, or there's somebody at least watching her that
Mhm.
she would go to the police or something like that, or talk to some people about it in a concerning manner, go like, hey, I think that somebody's after me and I kind of want some help here. So it just seems like that seems a little kind of
Yeah. I'm not sure if this is meant to be commentary or like a thing, or if it's just me kind of making excuse. But I do know in the night, especially during the '90s, of like Japanese police were kind of dismissive towards women at the time, and that like it's a very different thing than from the American police when it comes to like witness protection. I'm I'm not entirely sure if that's the point or if not, but yeah, it's just one of those things. Yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing
So-
I could maybe throw out there just is the idea of with such a frazzled kind of mindscape, being an unreliable narrator, it's possible
That's true.
that these things are happening. I mean, you know, there are interviews happening, but because she is jumping between these kind of points in time and points in her days and feels so forgetful and discombobulated with what's going on around her that it feels like those maybe just don't matter to the state that she's existing in. But again, that's just one.
Yeah.
I haven't seen a ton of like Japanese horror from the 70s, but I do wonder if it was like kind of the same thing with like American horror in like the 70s or 80s. Because now when in America, a lot of American horror movies, like they don't go to the police at all, and everyone's like, the audience is like, why didn't they go to the police? It's because if you ever watch American horror movies from like the 70s or 80s, they do go to the police, and like immediately the police are like, right, that happened, and they just immediately dismiss it. And so
Yeah.
it might have been the same thing. So Japan might have just been like, hey, let's get rid of that trope.
Yeah. Yeah, that just recently happened in
Maybe say something
Barbarian.
about corporate cover-ups too.
Yeah, could be.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
corporate
yeah.
cover. Yeah. And also I guess you could say that there is at one point in the movie where she thinks she committed a murder, so she doesn't want to go to the police too. So there is that. There's one point because she's so her mind, she's having these dreams and these weird moments. Like she has one, like it goes 3 times in a row where she wakes up from a dream and she thinks she's doing something, and you think it's really what's happening.
Yeah.
So that is it could be a case too there.
Mhm.
What will be your rating for this, Sage?
I think I'm gonna give it a peek. It's not my favorite thing in the world, and even though I don't have a ton of negative criticisms, I wouldn't put it right at the top just because I think that maybe in terms of mass appeal, some of the subject matter can be off-putting for certain people. But I think if it's something that you feel like you can stomach and sit through, and kind of allow yourself that uncomfortability, I do think it's one of the best psychological horrors that you can really find, especially in like the anime genre, the kind of the medium of anime. I think it stands out being pretty unique. I haven't seen a ton else like it. Even Satoshi Kon's other movies all feel very different from each other.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it's definitely an experience. If you're a big cinema fan, big animation fan, definitely check it out. If those couple of subject matter elements aren't too off-putting.
Okay, nice. Mike, what about you?
I think I'll give this as a peek too. It's not my favorite Satoshi Kon movie, or even like the thing he did. I'd say maybe his best work is Paranoia Agent, and is able to play a lot more of like abstract visuals and stuff like that. But still, not a ton of movies that have like tried to like, or even TV shows that have really tried to approach like this subject matter have really been able to like hit it as well as Perfect Blue, and stand the test of time nonetheless. I think the closest like I could honestly with like 100% of my heart say is like close to being as good as The Thing would be I actually posted it in chat, but it would Be My Cat, a film for Anne, which is a horror movie by a Romanian filmmaker. It's entirely found footage. It's almost like Perfect Blue, but through like a found footage from the stalker's point of view. And this guy's just completely not there. And it's over the top in the good places, but it's more like deeply personal and uncomfortable as opposed to like trying to be like cinematically scary, if that makes sense. Yeah, it's everyday horror is the best way I would put it.
Okay. So yeah, as influential as this movie is, and seeing it for the first time, I was very impressed by it. I see why so many people saw it and fell in love with it. Really great voice performances that you have here.
Oh,
Really
yeah.
great psychological thriller here. I mean, this is kind of maybe one of the GOAT psychological thrillers that a lot of other psychological thrillers are based on, that you kind of can look at and get a good sense of that, which is very nice. And I did have a great time with it. The way it was playing with this mental state here, the reveal at the end, the conclusion at the end was very nice. I thought was very good. Love the different tricks that that are played in this movie. Like you mentioned, the scene with the stalker, holds his hand out and like literally, he's in, she's in the palm of his hand, which is really nice. The scenes where Rumi is the Mima personality. You see her in the mirror and then the reflection there, and you kind of see that there. I thought that was really good. So yeah, I would give it a very high peak, bordering on this is cinema. That little nitpick I guess I had about the police thing, I guess was there, but could be a reason behind that.
Oh yeah, it's fine.
There's that. Yeah. So yeah, 2 peaks for that, and a little bit of, I guess a peak for me too. 3 peaks for Perfect Blue, the 1997 anime film by Satoshi Kon. So is his best movie, would you say, is it Tokyo Godfathers or is it Paranoid Agent?
Paprika? Well, Paranoid Agent is a series, so
series.
It's a limited series, but it's like 12, maybe 8 episodes. God, it's tough because he's like, it's one of those things of like when you're talking about like such a prolific director and like how especially one who he passed away in like 2016, 2015, something like that.
2010.
Oh, sorry.
Actually, it's just recently passed the anniversary of his death. He died in August 21st.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He died
like
46.
It's almost like looking back at like some of Stanley Kubrick stuff, like especially now, like knowing like how much of an influence he had of like gosh, this is really good. It's hard to rank. Like if someone told me that this was their favorite movie of his, I'd be like, totally fair. I still think movie-wise, Tokyo Godfather might be my favorite. And I think my favorite thing of his overall is Paranoia Agent. But,
Okay. What about you, Say? Have you seen his other movies?
Yeah. I've watched at least those 4 things that we've mentioned. And personally, my favorite is Paprika. And some of that's just I'm such a sucker for the just mesmerizing dream visuals of that movie. Yeah, I think that one, and that one, I think maybe, it really leans into the whole duality of like the real person and the avatar, that kind of similar. It's get some of the similar ideas that Perfect Blue kind of touches on too, and it's just visually so striking. That movie that goes up there with stuff like Fantastic Planet or
Mhm.
the Yellow Submarine animated movie, and it's just so interesting.
Mm. Nice. Yeah. So, Perfect Blue there.